5. Peter Pumpkin Eater. The story begins with our author looking through his telescope at the moon, trying his best to be quiet because he knew his mother would be upset if she caught him up so late. Everything was normal until a low grumble was heard out in the night. He assumed it was his mother coming to check up on him, so he jumped into bed and under the covers. He heard footsteps, then another grumble. This time though, he could make out faint words. Was his mother talking to someone? The sound began to grow louder, getting closer and closer to his door. It sounded as though a large metal object was being dragged across the floorboards. He shouted out, "Mother, is that you?" But nothing. It became clear that whoever was there was singing a melody, but it was too masculine to be his mother. The noises got louder and louder. Lightning then struck, lighting up the room for a brief moment. Our author could see in the mirror opposite that he was not alone. He leapt out of his bed into the corner of the room, hiding under his teddy bears. He lifted his head, and there it was, a shadowy figure standing in the darkness. The figure then whispered in an eerie tone,
Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had a wife but couldn't keep her. He kept her in the pumpkin shell, and there he kept it very well. Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had another and didn't love her. Up the chimney he did shove her.
And that's where our creepypasta ends. In a log added later, it details how the mother and son were found dismembered inside their chimney. No details were left behind, and the killer may still be on the loose.
Number 4 on this list is the story of a ghostly mother. Kevin, a teenager at the time of this incident, swears by this story and its truth. He and his friends had heard a rumor of this one turn off of a highway. It was said that many years prior, a mother and her young son at the time were driving down that highway on Halloween. And when they went to make the turn, they crashed the car and they died. Being on Halloween and being an untimely death, this sparked rumors of a haunting at the site of the crash. Kevin and his friends heard about these and decided that on Halloween they would take a drive out there and see for themselves. Now the rumor was that this mother was a friendly ghost meant to protect people from making the same error that she had. So what the boys did was they covered their car in flour to test the theory. Then, rather dangerously, they hit the gas pedal. They started rocketing down the highway and they were going to take this turn very unsafely. Right as they got to the turn though, Kevin lost full control of his vehicle. It wasn't responding. He and his friends immediately feared death, but to their surprise, the vehicle slowed to a very quick halt. They all got out completely blown away by what had just happened, and sure enough, on the bumper of their car was 2 handprints left in the flour that hadn't flown off. Clearly, the mother had seen what they were doing and did as the legend suggested, protecting them from dying on Halloween like her and her son had decades prior. Number 3 on this list is the Murderous Prediction from David Berkowitz. David, or the son of Sam as some of you may know him, is an American serial killer who went on a killing spree in 1976 and 1977. David is currently serving 6 consecutive life sentences for the crimes that he committed back then and will die in prison. The murders occurred in New York City and David is credited with 6 of them whilst also injuring 7 other people. At the time, this case got the attention of the nation because he induced the largest New York City manhunt that the world had ever seen. He would often leave notes to the police mocking them and promising future murders. It really all was a sadistic joke to him and he clearly loved the attention. On August 10th of 1977, the police finally found and arrested him. He was very quick to plead guilty to everything that he'd been accused of, clearly proud of his work. While he was incarcerated though, this is where the potential paranormal event comes in. What's really spooky is the prediction he made while he was in prison. David predicted that a murder would take place on Halloween to 2 people and mocked the law enforcement about it. This was chalked up as mumbo jumbo at the time and it wasn't taken seriously. However, on Halloween morning of 1981, 2 people, Ronald and Elizabeth, were beaten and shot in their Manhattan home. This was exactly how David had predicted it, with him even laying out the exact layout of their apartment. Now, how on earth did he know that this was going to happen from the inside of a jail cell? Some people believe that the son of Sam was part of a larger cult group and that he had not acted alone during the initial murders. This could potentially lead to the explanation of how he had known about this murder. But he had also been in jail for quite some time at this point, and it seems strange that he would have known every detail about it. Either way, we can rest easy knowing that he's behind bars and hasn't made a scary prediction like that in a long time. Number 2 on this list is the story of an invited dinner guest. A newlywed husband and wife were having a dinner party for 4 other friends on Halloween. This was one of their first dinners hosted as a married couple and were very excited about it. The other guests arrived, and after some wine and chatting, they sat down for dinner. Right as they did, a knock at the door was heard. This wasn't out of the ordinary. They'd been receiving knocks all night by trick-or-treaters. So Darren, the husband of the newlyweds, went to the door to give out some candy, but when he opened the door, nobody was there. He supposed that it may have been some teenagers, maybe they were pulling a prank or something. Anyways, he went back to the dining room, he sat down, and then he noticed an extra plate had been set. No one had realized that it was there because they were all chatting and having fun, but he could have sworn that when he set that table, he only put 6 down. He guessed he must have made a mistake, and he put it away. Then some time had passed, and they decided to all head to the kitchen, and now they were going to go serve themselves. They all did so, but when they got back, just as it was before, there was the plate and all the cutlery and the wine glass, except this time they weren't empty, but the plate was filled to the brim with food. The whole group had no idea what was happening, or if somebody was playing a trick on them, all accusing one another that they were pranking the other ones. Eventually, they decided to leave it there, thinking that it may have been a spirit of some kind. Well, as they ate, the craziest thing happened. Whenever no one was looking at that plate and everyone's eyes were averted, the food would disappear. And by the end of the evening, right as everyone was finishing, the plate and the wine glass were cleaned off. To this day, the couple has no idea what happened or how it took place. The only explanation that Darren has is that when he opened that door, he must have let a Halloween spirit into their home that wanted to stay for dinner. Number 1 on this list is the story from 3 young teenage girls. Clara, Elle, and Maddie, all 14-year-old girls, were having a sleepover with one another on Halloween. This was the first year that they decided to not go trick-or-treating and stay in. However, that doesn't mean that they didn't celebrate the spooky evening in another way. Clara had recently lost her grandfather to a long battle of cancer. She was feeling bummed out about it and suggested that they try something on Halloween. She wanted to perform a seance so that they could contact her grandfather and have one final interaction with him. This would be the first one that these girls had ever done, but were willing to give it a shot. They gathered up a few things that belonged to him. His watch, his cigar case, a photograph of him when he was younger. They lit some candles, held hands, and began to perform the ritual. Suddenly, the candles flickered and the air grew thick and a presence was palpable. The girls clutched their hands tighter and knew that what they were doing was releasing some sort of spirit force. The flames on the candles doubled in size, and just as they did, a low, echoing voice boomed from the center of the room. "Clara, save me." Save you? Why would I have to save you? Clara's mind raced. What was happening to her grandfather? She yelled back, "Save you from what, Grandpa?" "It hurts, Clara. It hurts so much." The voice screamed back through the void. Her anxiety grew. This isn't what she had expected this to be. She started to respond, "What is hurting you?" But she couldn't finish what she was saying because another voice entered into the mix. An even deeper and far more menacing voice than her grandfather's roared from the flames. "His soul is mine and yours will be too." Just then, one of the candles flew directly at Clara's face, grazing her as she was just able to react in time to get out of the way. The girls screamed, let their hands go, retreating to the back of the room, tears streaming down their face. This was enough to end the seance. The candles returned to their normal height, the voices depleted to nothing, and the presence seemingly left. But the picture of her grandfather had burned right as they were retreating and left only ashes behind. Whenever you are performing a ritual where you contact the dead, you always run the risk of interacting with a demon or potentially learning something that you wish that you hadn't. Both things happened to Clara and her friends on that one Halloween.
Kicking off at number 5, The Exorcist. And what a film it is! Widely heralded as the most accurate cinematic depiction of demonic possession, The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, took the cinematic world by storm during the early 70s, so much so that some cinemas provided Exorcist bath bags for certain viewers that found the film too much to handle. Roger Ebert, a critic of critical acclaim, believed that the special effects were so unusually graphic that he slated for the film to be rated X rather than its R rating on release. He gave it a 4 out of 4 star review though, describing it as a raw and painful experience. That's exactly what it is. The Exorcist is a story about Regan, a 12-year-old girl played by the incredible Linda Blair. Long story short, she's possessed by Pazuzu, an ancient demon who exploits and perverses the girl into a bizarre, twisted version of a human. In essence, that's the crux of the film, body horror, and Lancaster Merrin, a veteran Catholic priest who tries to save the poor girl's soul. It's a demonstration of twisted body horror, incredibly appropriate special effects, and a simple plot that gnaws at that dark, hidden place in your soul.
In at 4, A Normal Halloween Night. This creepypasta documents the final time our author ever celebrated Halloween. When he was 10, there was news that a serial killer was on the loose in his area. That didn't deter him or his friends though. They got dressed up and ventured out for a night of Halloween fun. The first house they went to, an old woman answered the door. She began to panic and said, "Good costume." The kids were confused as they knew their Halloween costumes were subpar at best, but they took the candy regardless. The next house they went to, a similar incident occurred. A middle-aged man answered the door and said, "Jesus, don't scare me like that." They looked at each other confused and responded, "What do you mean?" He replied, "It's a very good costume, nothing more." He then gave them a lot of candy, but our author couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. They then went to a house at the end of the street where a crazy woman lived. Again, they scared her. "Good costume," she said. "That's the best costume I've ever seen." Our author finally broke and responded, "Whose costume?" She replied, "The guy in the serial killer costume behind you." Ugh. In at 3, My Last Halloween. Our author begins this story by describing one particular Halloween when he took his children out trick-or-treating. It was an unspoken rule that you only knock on the doors of the homes with lights on, but this particular night the eldest child wanted to knock on the door of a towering 2-story house that for the past 2 seasons had been vacant. The author had noticed a moving truck parked outside a month back, so he agreed and his children approached. They knocked, but there was no answer. After a moment or two, the door slowly creaked open and a voice beckoned. "Trick or treat." The children cheered. The father felt something was off though and approached before the voice rang out again.
"I choose both."
2 hands then appeared, pulling both of the children inside. The door slammed shut and our author pounded and pounded, but there was no response. He then proceeded to kick down the door, shouting out to his children. They searched the house, but to no avail. The children were not there. It has now been a year and there has been no word. In at 2, The Masked Man. Our author in this creepypasta documents a handful of days over the Halloween period with his son James, who was adamant on dressing up as Buzz Lightyear. During the lead up to the big day, our author was preparing for his son's arrival, as he only gets special holidays following the split from his wife. On the night of October 22nd, our author details seeing a creepy man lurking around his property, almost scoping it out. He hid out of sight and peeked through the window, trying to catch a glimpse of who the masked figure was. He drew back the curtains and came face to face with the snooper, who was donning a mask similar to the one from the Scream franchise, only this time the jaw seemed to be swaying in the wind, and it had fang-like teeth. The masked man's left eye began to scan around, drifting away from where it fixated, locating our author. As it did, it disappeared. Now hopping over to October 25th, our author has a bizarre encounter with one of his neighbours that he doesn't know too well. He had placed a bowl of candy outside with a chicken scratch sign that read, "Take one." Oddly though, the sign was smeared in bloody fingerprints. He then recounts how the one and only time he had encountered his neighbour, he was looking distraught and rushing out of his house. He had said that he was late for work, which our author found odd as it was 8:30 at night. The neighbour then said he worked as a biologist at a military base and said no more. Heading into October 28th, our author has yet another encounter with the masked man. This time though it was much more sinister. Our author recalled hearing the sound of a cat screeching. He approached his window and saw the masked man, only this time its entire body. It ran like an ostrich. It was spotted with spindly hairs and blue veins, and its head appeared to be decomposing. The cat hopped a fence and the masked man followed, effortlessly leaping after it. It's now the night of the 30th. At 12:15 AM, our author hears an aggressive knock at the door. He answers. It's the neighbour, but not the creepy one, the one who lives behind him. He accuses him of scaring his wife with that creepy mask. Our author is offended that he could ever possibly think it was him, but pleased that others have been seeing the masked madman. The neighbor goes on to say, I quote, "I saw you jump clean over that fence of yours and crawl right back into your basement." Wait, what? Concerned, he opens the door to see his son just as he had left him, sleeping facing the wall. He returns to the neighbor who says, "Just stay the hell away from me and my family," before an aggressive tone takes over him and a chuckle erupts with bottomless blue eyes emerging, the same eyes he saw outside. He then says, "I gotta hand it to you though. I nearly busted out laughing when I saw you running around wearing your little kid's Buzz Lightyear costume. What the fuck?" In at 1, Trick or Treat. Now this creepypasta opens with the line, "Don't bother trying to find it. You won't find anything about the name of the town or what happened here." Yikes. I'm not sure I want to proceed, but let's proceed. The author begins by taking us back to All Hallows Eve in the old country, and how they were the first to celebrate the occasion as a holiday. He describes how the natives were confused by their behavior at this time of year, but left them alone out of fear. On this night they went out on their settlement, collecting apples and tarts. The author's little girl dressed as the Queen of England. Thank you, sir. She promised to return after sundown and not to linger too long at the households of the community. I'm getting nervous. The community was unaware of the house at the edge of the settlement until children began to enter. It was unlit and had no windows or fire to speak of, but the house seemed to be shimmering. Our author questioned it, asking other settlers about the house, but they all thought him odd, saying, "What do you mean? There's no house there. They're going to play by the stockades." He decided to venture out towards the house the children were heading towards, and what he saw through the cracks of the house unsettled him. He drew his knife, entering the home, but when he got inside he knew his knife would be useless against the forces inside. There he saw a black cloud, entering the nose and mouth of his daughter, as well as the rest of the children from the settlement. But before he could react, the black smoke entered him, and before he knew it he was outside of his body, watching on at the horrors around him. They were led back to the settlement and to the meeting hall. Parents embraced their children happily, and this is what led to the destruction of their little community. They absorbed them all, and this creepypasta is a warning to read the signs and not stray into the settlement known as Roanoke. Phew.
Number 5 on the list is the story of Stingy Jack. Now this story is actually an Irish urban legend, and it is the origin of jack-o'-lanterns. Several hundreds of years ago in Ireland there was a man named Jack who was dubbed Stingy Jack because 1, he was very stingy, but also he was very deceitful and could easily trick people into doing what he pleased. Now even though Jack was super smart and probably could have used this to make a legacy for himself, his pleasures were simple and he would spend his days drinking at the pub. One Halloween evening, Jack was drunk and walking around when he stumbled upon a body lying in the middle of the road. This turned out to be the devil, and the devil had come to collect Jack's soul. Before the devil took Jack to hell, Jack pleaded to have one more opportunity to drink ale at the pub, his last request. The devil allowed it, and the pair went to the pub and Jack enjoyed his final drink. When he was finished, he asked if the devil could pay, considering he didn't have any money. The devil didn't have any either, so Jack convinced the devil to change his appearance into a shiny coin so that they could use that, and then he would just switch back afterwards. The devil enjoyed messing with lesser beings, like the bartender, and decided to do what Jack suggested. He was tricked though, and Jack took his coin and put it in his pocket where he also had a crucifix. He made the devil promise not to collect his soul for 10 more years, and the devil was forced to agree. 10 years passed, and sure enough, there was the devil again waiting to collect. This time though, Jack asked if he could have an apple before he went to hell. The devil, for whatever reason, agreed and climbed a nearby tree to fetch him one. When he got to the top and looked down, crucifixes littered the ground of the tree and the devil couldn't leave. This time, Jack made him swear to never take his soul to hell, which the devil, again, had to agree to. This was a mistake from Jack though. Several years later, the drinking caught up to him, and he died. When his soul tried to enter heaven, he was denied for being sinful his whole life. But then when it tried to enter hell, he was also denied because the devil said that he couldn't take his soul. The devil gave him one ember inside of a turnip, which acted as a makeshift lamp to guide his way through purgatory. On Halloween, some local Irish folks saw this makeshift lamp, and throughout the years that has blossomed into the jack-o'-lanterns that we know and make today.
Coming in at number 4, Wreck. Please, 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 please watch the 2007 original Spanish version of this film and not the atrocious US remake. Seriously, please watch this film and just forget about the other one. This is a tried and tested process. If you watch this film alone on Halloween, you will be completely and utterly terrified. In fact, even if you watch this film with a group of friends in the middle of the day, you'll still be completely and utterly terrified. Widely slated as the one handheld found footage modern horror film that actually got it right, Wreck is a Spanish horror co-written and directed by Jaime Balaguero and Paco Plaza. I don't want to spoil a lot for you because going into this film with a fresh set of eyes is the best way to approach it. Let me put it this way though, the last 5 minutes of this film are some of the most suspenseful moments in recent cinematic history. Yeah, the film itself kinda leaves a lot open to interpretation, playing a bit loose and fast with horror tropes, and the wider franchise that it spawned was unremarkable at best. But if you're up for a scare this Halloween, then Wreck is your best bet. Next up at number 3, Hellraiser.
We'll tear your soul apart.
We'll tear your soul apart. Need I say more? One of the most chillingly iconic lines in the glorious era of the 80s horror era. Clive Barker is a colossal visionary of horror, and his small budget lo-fi horror masterpiece has spawned 30 years worth of cult following. The less you know about this film the better really, and admittedly it's not for everyone, but its true genius lies in believably haunted character design and one of the most iconically demonic villains of all time. In my opinion, Pinhead. Oh Pinhead, you scary, scary boy. This guy haunted my nightmares as a young fledgling horror fan, not only because of his incredibly vivid design, but because he was the first modern, quiet, unpredictable villain. He wasn't really a villain either, but more of a force of nature. He was the definition of the unknown and unrelenting Cenobites. Take it from me, if you ever find yourself with a weird antique puzzle box, don't solve it, just leave it well alone. Coming in at our number 2 spot, The Thing.
Clear.
If you've seen our recent run of Halloween-based videos, then you'll know just how much of a John Carpenter fan I am. The Thing isn't just one of the best horror films ever made, it's one of the best films ever made. You could purely listen to the soundtrack of this film and still be filled with an eerie, overwhelming sense of dread. The Thing is a film that is more than the sum of its parts and demonstrates itself as the greatest creature feature of all time. Why? Simply because unlike the xenomorph of the Alien franchise or the straightforward narrative of Jaws, we still know absolutely nothing about the Thing, the titular creature of John Carpenter's masterpiece. It's the fear of the unknown. Crazy then that on its release in 1982, it was described as instant junk, a wretched excess, and even proposed as the most hated film of all time. But obviously they were so wrong, because The Thing has spawned a cult following spanning nearly 40 years, and I can think of no better film to watch on Halloween than this one. Maybe except for one, that is. Coming in at our number 1 spot, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yeah, bear with me. Admittedly, The Thing is a better film all in all. On Halloween in particular, nothing will shred your nerves and get your heart racing better than Tobe Hooper's 1974 slasher masterpiece, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Don't mind. You like this, Dave?
Why? Well, as you can see from the infamous dinner scene, which is probably on the tamer side of the film's iconic reel, this film is a complete and utter emotional ordeal. It's hard to watch and still holds up to this day as one of the most unnerving cinematic experiences out there. It's a simple equation: the South, a weird family of cannibals, a van full of teenagers, and one of the most iconic killers in horror cinema. If you don't know anything about Leatherface, then look into him, because this character is undoubtedly the stuff of nightmares, partly based on real-life serial killer Ed Gein. The success of the film as a horror masterpiece is partly down to the performance of its cast, a ramshackle bunch of relatively unknown Texan actors who managed to nail down the reality captured within this film. Because in essence, that's exactly why this film is so damn scary. It feels real. It's almost snuff-like in nature and leaves this weird, flat, disgusting feeling in the pit of your stomach. If you're looking for a film to scare the bejesus out of you this Halloween, then look no further than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.